scariest thing about these games? People actually bought them. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 worst horror games based on horror movies. Before we begin, we publish new videos every day, so be sure to subscribe for more great content. For this list, we're looking at games created by developers who tried to tie their games to existing horror franchises. But as history has shown, these often end with horrific results. Number 10, The Crow, City of Angels. While the film series was a great choice for a video game spin-off, thanks to its gritty atmosphere and focus on action, the game that graced consoles was nowhere near worthy of carrying on the same name. A beat-em-up where you'll spend more time in loading screens than in actual combat. Players have to fight both their foes and the camera. Seemingly hell-bent on getting us to rage quit, all of the actual difficulty in this game came from just trying to angle Ash Corvin to actually hit something. Number 9, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. With his trusty chainsaw in tow, Leatherface is an icon of the horror genre for good reason. After all, he's big, he's menacing, and wears people's faces as masks. Come on. How cool is it then that all the way back on the Atari 2600 that you got to play as the killer himself? As it turns out, not very cool. Not cool at all. Your goal is to collect as many points as possible by hunting down your victims for as long as your chainsaw's fuel lasts. But even by Atari standards, the game really doesn't hold up. It's hideous to look at, and every time a girl appears on screen and screams, you'll swear you wish you were deaf instead. Number 8, Predator, Concrete Jungle. Another game where you play as the bad guy. This one moves away from the isolated jungles of Central America to pit the predator, Scarface, against Italian and Mexican-American mob bosses. Yeah, that's kinda similar to the plot of the second movie, but that movie also sucked. Anyway, back to the game. We could live with a lazy, nonsensical story, but Scarface is so awkward to control that actually killing your intended target is much harder than it needs to be, and completely ruins any chance at redemption. Number 7, Bram Stoker's Dracula. This monstrosity features crappy full-motion video clips that are so compressed they're almost unwatchable, and that's just the very tip of the iceberg. The game manages to have a decent gothic atmosphere, but the first time you try to move your character through the levels, you'll experience some of the worst platforming ever. While the SNES version is also pretty terrible, it's the Sega CD version that embarrasses the source material the most. The movements are so choppy, you'll constantly miss time jumps, and by the time you've killed your 800th bat, you'll just want to turn the game off and play Castlevania instead. Number 6, Evil Dead, A Fistful of Boomstick.
You want to see a lunatic, buddy? Why don't you come on down here and I'll show you a whole bottle full of lunatic.
Failing to deliver on our high hopes, this sequel to Hail to the King managed to get Bruce Campbell to reprise his role as Ash, but that's about the only interesting thing going on here.
You eggheads never do anything the easy way, do you?
Swarms of enemies constantly harass you at every opportunity, but they're so weak that they never provide a challenge. So mowing them down one after another with your titular boomstick gets repetitive really fast. You'll experience everything the game has to offer in about 20 minutes, and once you put it down, you will not want to pick it back up again. Number 5, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Escaping a wisecracking nightmare demon in a dream world sounds like can't-miss concept for a survival horror game, but unfortunately, LJN decided to take this adaptation in a direction that drops the ball in a major way. Ignoring everything that makes the film so great, gamers control a local teenager trying to dispose of Freddy's remains while battling some of the least inspired enemies of all time. Yep, you guessed it, bats and spiders. We were excited to finally come face to face with Freddy himself in the boss fights, but even those are laughably easy. So there's basically no challenge, no depth, and no reason to play this one. Number 4, Saw 2, Flesh and Blood. The first adaptation of the Saw films as a video game was really nothing to write home about, but Konami's follow-up managed to be worse in almost every possible way. Requiring players to navigate their way around the notorious traps by solving progressively more challenging puzzles is an okay concept, obviously, but there are so many quick-time events that you're constantly ripped right out of the atmosphere that the game is trying so hard to create. There's some combat thrown in for good measure, but waiting for enemies to wander into just the right spot to trigger your trap is not scary, it's boring. Doesn't matter how much you like the franchise, give it a pass.
Let the game begin.
I'm not dying in here.
Number 3, Aliens, Colonial Marines.
I need you to be my eyes in there. Report back anything you see so I know what I'm up against.
Probably one of the most disappointing releases of all time. This title had so many problems at launch it was practically unplayable. While the single-player story was hyped as being canon to the film franchise, it makes no sense, and in many cases contradicts the source material directly.
So who's laying these eggs?
I'm not sure.
Other issues show up on the multiplayer side too, like unbalanced weapons, but the worst offender is the amount of glitches that just sucked you right out of the experience every time you're about to get invested. Improvements have been made to it with patches, but it's definitely not worth your time anyway. Number 2, Friday the 13th, 1989. Ignoring a goldmine of content just waiting to be exploited, this title didn't even try to provide an authentic Crystal Lake experience. Right from the start, you're dropped into the camp with very little idea of what to do or where to go, and to make matters worse, you have to figure it out as quickly as possible while fighting an in-game timer. Jason will kill more and more counselors the longer you take, but it doesn't really matter because you'll never be strong enough to save them from his vengeful fists. You'll spend your time in the game wandering around aimlessly until you die, and then you'll probably never turn it on again. Number 1, Van Helsing. Surpassing them all, this game is plagued with every issue in the book. It's ugly to look at, confusing as hell, and has entire sections of the game with almost no music, which, by the way, helps make it one of the most boring horror games ever imaginable. Spray some bullets towards a skeleton and then turn and kill a werewolf. After every few kills, use your special. If you do this for the laughably short 3-hour story, you'll have beaten the whole game, but we can't imagine you'll have lasted that long.
Like you, they show me far too little respect.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out these other great clips from WatchMojo and subscribe for new videos every day.